Welcome, welcome. You can turn on your cameras. You can do as you please. You all been here with us for the last couple of webinars celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. I see some familiar faces from last week. And then today's webinar, we have something amazing for you all. It's a cozy get to know our founders. And so we have prepared some questions for them, but again, I just want you all to know that you can type in your questions in the chat. You can raise your hand to ask them a question yourself. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to warm up and get your cafecito ready because you're about to find out about how NLCUP got started and who started NLCUP. So we're super excited to have some founding members here, still part of our board today, which is really, really special. So we're so excited. Again, my name is Barbara Mojica. I'm the Executive Director for NLCUP, and I'll be your moderator today. And without further ado, I want to introduce two ladies, two special women for the industry, Maria Martinez and Winona Nava. Maria Martinez, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll pass it over to Winona.
Buenas tardes a todos. Hola, bienvenidos y feliz día, bueno, mes de la hispanidad. Thank you so much for being here. NLCUP, it's like my baby. It's been, you know, when you have kids, and I know so many of you look so young, you probably don't even have kids, but you have nephews and nieces, and you were a kid at some point. And when you have kids, you take care of them. And that's the way I feel NLCUP has been for me. It's been something that I've taken care of it. And I'm just so happy that it's grown and it became an adult. And now it's being run by other people, and it's being run correctly. So the foundation was there. The foundation was a good foundation for us to bring up NLCUP. My name is Maria Martinez, and I'm with Border Federal Credit Union in Del Rio, Texas. We are right on the border. If 10 minutes down the road, it's Mexico. So yes, if you ever come visit me, bring your passport. I'll take you there. If you don't bring your passport, I'll leave you there. So we'll figure it out. But I have connections, so I think I can bring you back or keep you in jail, something like that. But you know, it's a little different in the border towns than it is in the big metropolitan areas. We tend not to have a lot of undocumented, especially when it's a small border town like ours. So most people that come through here, they go into the bigger cities. So we don't have a lot of accounts for undocumented individuals, and we don't do hardly any IT lending because of that, because they don't stick around, they don't stay here because they're afraid. Like, for instance, just to give you an idea, Border Patrol station is behind my main office. So, you know, my couple of my neighbors are either Border Patrol or Customs or DEA or ICE. So they live all over the place here. So that's why people don't stick around here. But needless to say, I mean, we provide a lot of services to Hispanics because about 90, at least 94 to 95% of the population in our communities are Hispanic. So it's not like I can say, no, I'm not going to service Hispanics. It's my job to do that. I've been involved with NLCUP since around 2006, when we started the conversation of engaging into forming a network of Latino professionals, because that's how this started. And since then, we've evolved. There's been a lot that has come through. But I'll tell you a little bit more about NLCUP, and I'm gonna hand it back to Barbara, and then you can follow through.
Thank you, Maria. We're so excited to learn from you. Winona, you want to do an introduction?
Sure, I'm Winona Nava. I'm retired from Guadalupe Credit Union. I was there for I was there for 32 years, and I have many more years in the credit union industry. But I became very inquisitive about serving the Hispanic community when all of a sudden we saw a lot of new immigrants in our area back around 2000. And that's when I started searching out some of the members of the original founders of the group. I've been involved since about 2011 or so when I did my first speaking engagement at one of their conferences. And it's been just wonderful ever since. I've really loved being a part of them and getting all the information from them. And even before that, I went and visited some of the founders so that I could see how they were doing things. And a huge portion of members of the credit union have I-10 loans and things of that nature. So it's been a great experience, and I've really enjoyed it. But I decided that I needed to let my successor take over because I've been grooming her. She'd been with me for 20 years, so it was time.
Oh, thank you, Winona. Well, they are missing a lot of key things that I know about them. Like Maria Martinez is actually one of the very first Latina CEOs in the credit union industry. And Winona Nava is a trailblazer for I-10 lending. She has revolutionized the way credit unions think about I-10 lending, you know, and she's a pioneer in that space. So we are in such awe of the work that you both have done. And more importantly, the space that you all have created for us. Look at the younger generation. I think maybe you guys are seeing the faces right now that are here with us at this webinar, and it's like, you know, these ladies trailblaze for all of us, and that's why we have NLCUP today. And just, I wanted to point out, October 2nd marks the anniversary of NLCUP founding. It was 19 years ago on October 2nd, a group of Latino leaders got together to come and visualize what NLCUP could be in the future. So can you take us back to a moment you realized NLCUP needed to exist? What were you feeling then, Maria?
So there was a conference, I think it was like in 1999, and it was in San Antonio. And I remember that I attended that conference, and that was probably the first time that I saw some Latinos, not a lot, but I saw some Latinos there, and I said, you know, there's really not too many people that look like me in this kind of environment. And back then, you know, it was I just became the CEO of the credit union. I was in San Antonio, which is, if you have been to San Antonio, it's mainly Hispanic community, which as I figure, well, maybe that's why. But one of the things that I remember is that there were a lot of people there from other countries. So it was not just, you know, people from the U.S. So that also complemented the fact that there were people from Mexico there. So, you know, people that look like me. So it was not because it was people from the U.S. that were attending. So that was in 1999, and that was in San Antonio, and they touched a lot of topics on same thing we're touching today: immigration and serving the Hispanic community. All that it's been a conversation, you know, since day one. So then, you know, as the years progressed, there was another conference that through the federation, which is now inclusive, they started having Latino credit union conferences before NLCUP even started. So the federation had this vision that they wanted to have conferences for Latinos or for Latino issues. And they would invite people from all over the place to come and talk. So they had a conference in Puerto Rico. And I didn't get to go to that conference in Puerto Rico. But during that conference, I believe Carlos Calderon and some of the other people that Pablo and some of the other people that are now board members or part of NLCUP, they attended. And there was some discussion that started at that conference about maybe forming a group. So there was talk and everything, but you know, that was probably in 2000. I had written down some notes, but I don't think I wrote that one down. The one in Puerto Rico. So then that happened, and then they decided to have another conference. So that was maybe like 2004 when that Puerto Rico conference happened. And then in 2006, Inclusive had another conference, and it was a Latino credit union conference, and this was in Durham, and that one I attended. And when I attended in Durham, there was this group of people that looked like me, and we all got together, and we started talking about issues. And of course, this was, you know, after hours, you know, you're hanging out, you know, having a drink, having some lemonade, And people not having coffee, it's too late to have coffee. And that's when we started talking about, we don't see a lot of people that look like us in our industry. And are there opportunities for others to move up? And so that's where the conversation started. So 2006 was a key year for us because we came together as a group to think about what we were going to do. So then from there, Carlos being in Washington, D.C., we said, maybe if this was to start in Washington, D.C., it's the capital of the world, the capital of the U.S., this might be good for us to start it there. So they drafted some articles of incorporation, and they registered NLCUP as a networking association. They registered this in Washington, D.C., and that's where the date comes through. And it was October of 2006. So that's how NLCUP started. And it was just a small group that thought we need to start an organization, just like you probably heard of AACUC. I'm sure they have a story like that there was a group that they didn't see people that looked like them, and they started CU Pride. CULA, the Credit Union Women's Leadership Alliance, it was a women's group. So all these organizations that we have within our industry, they've started because there was a vision. And that's what we thought. We said we need something in our industry.
I love that. And for all of you wondering, there's actually a historical picture of their gathering in Durham. So if you go to the website and you see about us, you'll see them there at the first I like to call it the first reunion of NLCUP. Winona, do you have anything to add to that question?
Just that for me, it was so important to find people that could help me learn and grow in it. And then by the time NLCUP was actually formed, we were pretty well down the road on it. So we started being a really big part of it. And I can say that in Santa Fe, it was funny for me because my husband and my children all look very Latino. So it really was strange for me when NCUA said we had to do this edit of how many people were of different nationalities. And I realized, oh, myself and one other employee, we're the token Anglos at our credit union.
Yes. Oh, I love it. So, going back to the foundation of NLCUP, and this question is for Maria. Can you paint the picture for us? Who came up with the name and who actually filed all the paperwork to make it official? I know a little bit of the story, but I would love to hear it again.
So it wasn't me, okay? So Carlos was in Washington. And so because we wanted this organization to be done in Washington, and at the time, I wasn't like part of the board. I was just a person that was there, because I had, a passion for it. And so Carlos, took it upon himself to get everything done. And he's the one that registered, the organization as the network. And that's why we didn't have the A in there, because it was the network of Latino credit unions and professionals. That was the original name. Now, we have the National Association. So in 2020, when we decided to go as a national association, we thought about adding the A, but we didn't because the NLCUP name and the logo was already recognized. People knew about the logo because we had been doing a lot of events. So we decided to leave the A out of it. Although some people spell it with NA. Spell it out, right? Because we'll get emails. We'll get emails and they add the A, which is nothing wrong with it. But that's why we left it like this. So you probably ask yourself, how come they didn't add the A? It doesn't add up, right? And so that's how it started. And then once they register the name, of course, when you do articles of incorporation and you file with the state, you have to file the names of those that are incorporating the organization. Well, my name was not in it, because I was not part of the organizing group. I was part of, the people that were talking about it, but not on the organizing group. So that was registered in 2006. And then we started having meetings. So Carlos was Carlos Calderon. And Carlos Calderon, for those of you that don't know him, he runs a credit union. He's from Bolivia. He's Boliviano. And he runs the Organization of American States. It's a credit union, the credit union and they serve all the employees and their families that work for the OAS. And so Carlos was the one that really got a lot of this stuff going, along with some of the other people. There was another guy, Carl Stewart, and he's retired CEO now, African American individual. He was also part of the group, that started this. And I believe Pablo, um, I want to say that maybe Luis Pastor. Luis Pastor was very, very active with this. And Luis Pastor was the CEO of Latino Community Credit Union in Durham. So there were a lot of names that have come throughout the years. So then we started having meetings and we form a board, and that's where I come in. We had Carlos as the chair. I believe Pablo at the time was the vice chair. And then within the time frame, we started having co-chairs. So, because nobody was like a chair, we started having co-chairs. So for the longest time, we had like Carlos and me, or Pablo and me, but it was always, I was always kind of involved. Uh, there's just so much history. It's like,
Yes.
Barbara keeps telling me we need to write a book.
Yes.
There's a lot of history. Mhm.
I love it. And yes, we do need to write a book. I'm currently in my master's in cooperatives and credit unions, and a lot of the historical contributions of Latinos to the movement is missing. So I've been thinking, Maria, you really need to write a book because we need all the contributions possible for research. Moving on to the next question. So I know that contrary to popular belief, our 2025 conference isn't actually the first conference. That's why we said we're backing más fuertes, because we actually did have a very first conference. Could you guys tell us a little bit more about when that conference took place? Maria, and then we'll pass it to Winona if she.
Okay. So the first conference was 2008. And so because we were so small, we only had a group of volunteers. We decided to join efforts with another organization. And at the time, it was, let me see, I brought some notes in here. So the first conference was in 2008, and that was NLCUP and Inclusive, which at the time it was the Federation. So we joined efforts with the Federation and we said, okay, let's have a conference. And that was in 2008. Remember, we formed in 2006. They were already having a conference, but NLCUP was not part of it. In 2008, we became part of it. We became one of the co-hosts in organizing the conference. And so that was in Dallas. Because we had it in Dallas, we had attendance was really high because people, they were hungry for this kind of conference. And I remember, I want to say we had at least 300 or 400 people there. It was the need was there. And Winona, did you attend that conference?
I sure did. That was a great conference. And I remember the Texas Credit Union League, which they were at the time, with Dick Insweiler helped sponsor that a lot. And it was just fabulous.
Yeah. No, it was, I mean, so that was the first conference in 2008. And then we were not having them every year. We would have them every other year. So in another year, I think it was like not 2010, we had another one that was in Pittsburgh, and that was NLCUP and Inclusive again. And then 2012, it was NLCUP and CUNA. At the time, it was CUNA that we joined efforts with them. So we would always kind of do it back to back with another one of their conferences because it worked out okay. And I know, Barbara, you and I had talked about what if we were to join efforts with another organization and have this maybe at the end or at the beginning of their conference. So we were doing that already, back then. So in 2012, when we had it in with CUNA, that was in San Diego, in California, and that was the last one that we had in 2012. And so, and then we decided, because remember, we were not, when we first joined together, we started having memberships. So we did have, we had a list of memberships that you could join, and we had some members. People would join as either a credit union or as individuals. And so we did that for a couple of years, but then we didn't have anything to offer anybody. So we decided, you know what, let's just pull back. We're not going to do that. And so unless you have something like right now, Barbara and your team, I mean, y'all are generating things that people can get. So there is a purpose for paying for a membership. We didn't have that because we work for credit unions. We didn't have the time to generate memberships and keep track of all that. So we decided just to remain a networking organization at the time.
I love that. I was thinking about the membership, and I was gonna say something, and now it'll come back. Winona, anything to add about the conferences?
Just that I remember them well and I loved them, and I spoke at several of them about things such as our outreach efforts and everything at Guadalupe, because we were doing such an extreme amount of it. And it was just, it was really great. And I'm so glad that they're back. I saw the excitement last year when people were there and they were so excited. And so I'm so happy that we have the conference.
No, we're so excited too. I think just hearing that you guys had 400 people in the first one, I'm like, oh my gosh, to better go, because I know that the one we did last year we had over 200 people, but we're hoping that that continues to increase as we get stronger as an association. And just to put it into perspective for the audiences, they were doing this all from volunteer base. So those conferences were all volunteer led. Now that I know how much it takes to put on a conference, I'm like, whoa, like you guys have so much projects on your hands. Very admirable.
Yeah, but remember, we were not doing it alone.
Right.
That is the difference right now. The difference is that NLCUP right now is very independent. You know, y'all are doing the conference on your own. Yes, you have staff, but there's still a lot of logistics that need to take place. And at that time, we were relying on CUNA, which was a big organization. We were relying on Inclusive, which was a big organization. So they were using their resources, and then they would give us a portion of the proceeds if there was any, you know, or if not, we would have to contribute. So in the contributions that were coming in were from sponsors. Really, all the activities that NLCUP ever ran were activities that sponsors, we generate the income from sponsors. So it's that's why I've always been very thankful, not just to the people that serve on the board, but to the industry partners, because thanks to them, NLCUP survived. So in 20, I think it was 28 or 2008 or 2009, we were having planning sessions because we didn't want this to die. And so we were having planning sessions. And then in 2010, we decided that we were going to have a networking event at the Governmental Affairs Conference. And you know, the Governmental Affairs Conference is one of the biggest conferences in credit unions. At the time, they used to bring in at least 3,000 people. Now it's like 5,000, you know, now it's ridiculous. It's big, it's humongous. But, we wanted to do something there. So in 2010, that's when we started having we had our first networking reception. And out of the networking receptions, we would do awards. As a matter of fact, Winona was a recipient in 2011, Winona, I think,
Yes.
of that. And so, because even though Winona was not part of the board, I can tell you that she was very active. I mean, if we needed anything, whether it would be training, people would call us, can we get this, can we get that? She would be the first one on the list. So, then she came on the board later on. But, a lot of things happen, for us to even get into the networking. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the networking receptions, because there's history behind that. But, I'll give it back to you, Barbara.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that flows directly into the next question is, can you share the origins of that networking reception at the GAC, and how did it get started? How has it evolved? whether it's in size, focus, or even its mission. And for the folks that don't know what GAC means, is the Governmental Affairs Conference is the biggest conference of the industry. It's where we all come together and, advocate for the credit union mission. So it's a little bit of history of GAC. Predominantly, the history of GAC has been white men attend, and so having NLCUP have a reception at GAC is a huge effort on behalf of our founding members. So, Maria, I'll table it back to you again, and then we'll pass it over to Winona.
So 2010, we decided let's have an event. We gave an award, and at that time it was in 2010 it was Harriet May, and Harriet May, she was the CEO of government GECU in El Paso. She started as a teller, and she made it to the CEO position. Built one of the biggest credit unions in El Paso area, and as of now, it's still the biggest. And Harriet, but she was very supportive of us, and so she was the first award that we gave at the networking event. Now you got to understand that here's little NLCUP, trying to have a reception at the GAC, being sponsored by CUNA, which is a big, big organization. So we decided to not have it as part of the conference. This was an off-site event. And the reason we kept it as an off-site event is because we wanted people to just walk out of the conference area and experience a little bit of DC. So the first one was at the National Press Club. And of course, if you've never been to the National Press Club, it's like a big deal. Why we had it there? Because Carlos had really good relations. He was a member of the press club. So, he got us in. Carlos has the connections in DC. So he said, I think I can get the press club, we can get in. And I have to look and see if I have any records on how many people attended. But I remember we had at least maybe 80, maybe 100, Winona. I know it kept growing, but that first year was small.
Well, there was quite a few people there.
Yes, yeah. And the way we would generate revenue for those events, because we were not paying, because NLCUP didn't have money. We would just ask for sponsors. Believe it or not, there was so much interest within the industry for people to come in and sponsor our events. And so, we were really happy that, CUNA, was also one of the sponsors at the time. But we had, some of the vendors like the True Stage, not True Stage, CUNA Mutual has always been there for us. Visa came through, PSCU, which now Valera. So most of those were organizations that the board members had relationships with. Like my core processor, they gave money. Winona, I think you probably had some of your vendors that also contributed for us to have that.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, and it was a little bit here and there. So, $1,000 here, $500 there. And by the time we knew it, we had enough to feed all the attendees for free. So it was a free event. And since then, we've kept it a free event. We've never had to put money out of our own pocket or charge anybody for that. And it's really neat. So the purpose of it was to discuss issues that had to deal with serving the Hispanic community. So we would invite, we had congressmen come in, congressmen and congresswomen, and then representatives from some of the major organizations within credit unions. And I don't know if if you want to add, I know you were one of the recipients of that award, and maybe you might want to elaborate on that.
It was just great. And like I say, it was just amazing to receive the award, but it was also it was such an amazing event. It was one of my favorite events of the whole GAC because I got to be with like-minded people. Yeah. And so that was really great.
Yeah.
I like that. Some of the feedback that I've gotten through the years is that the networking reception at GAC is the first time people, especially people of color and Latinos, felt like they belonged at GAC. So NLCUP really has bridged those gaps, and I'm so proud of the networking reception at JC. I actually attended in 2019 as a crasher for the very first time. And, my life has just come full circle because now I work for NLCUP. I am so intrigued by this question. So Maria, when you look back at these early conversations about starting NLCUP and forming NLCUP, what's a memory that still gives you goosebumps?
You know, I knew we could do it. I knew we could do it, but it was a challenge because sometimes you don't want to get out of your comfort zone. How do I tell the world that I'm Hispanic and that I want to build this community of people that look like me? When you walk into a room, and especially me, being a CEO, and I serve on many boards, I serve on many committees throughout my career, and walking into a room where you were the only one that looked like you, and putting on the agenda an item that I need your support to bring in people that look like me together, that gives me goosebumps because it really, but you got to start somewhere. Somebody has to do it. And it was not just me, I'm just saying me, but it was the whole board. It was the people like Winona that believed in us. And Winona may not be my skin color, but I can tell you that she's done more for people that look like me than many of the Hispanics that I know. So, sometimes you just need those allies. And you can tell because if you look at the history of the awards that we gave out, the people that we gave them to, they were not Hispanics. The people that we gave those awards were people that just supported us. Bill Cheney, Dickens Weiler, Harry May, Winona Nava. These people were just people that believed in us. And that's what we need. We need those allies. If we can bring those allies to hang out with us, then that's all we need. And that may work even for those of you that are on the call today, that sometimes you want to be moved up. And maybe the person that's going to support you in making that move, it's not somebody that's going to look like you, but they're going to believe in you. And I think if they can believe in you, then you're going to achieve whatever it's on your mind that you want to accomplish. Yeah.
I like that. Winona, any memories of NLCUP that give you goosebumps?
I don't know if it was exactly goosebumps, but I was so excited when I found the support for what we were trying to do at our credit union. It was just so exciting because it was so hard when I was starting out because I didn't know where to start. And so it was just a huge, huge relief, was more, I guess, than goosebumps for me, was a huge relief to find out that there were people out there doing this. It was possible.
Yes.
Because,
yeah. And Barbara, it's funny because sometimes people would call me throughout my whole career. People would call me, hey, we're looking for a Hispanic to serve on board, especially after 2020 when, diversity, equity, and inclusion was a big deal and people needed people to serve on their boards or committees. And they would call me, and it's really hard when you have to really think about those names. And it's because we're not out there. I need to know that, that Cesar Chavez, it's out there, that I can put his name out there. I want to know that Jimena is out there. I wish I could say that. I wish I could pull names and say, this is the person you need on your committee. And that's what we need to help each other. And I can tell you that a lot of the people that I've met throughout the years, they would call me and I said, well, have you considered Carlos? Have you considered Pablo? Have you considered, because of the relationships that you built. So that's why, being a volunteering and doing things out of the norm will help you move ahead, will help you achieve those goals and serve on committees, serve on boards. But you got to raise a hand. Nobody's going to come and grab you out of your desk to do that.
That advice. Pivoting to the next question, was there a moment where you almost thought, oh, this is not going to work? And then if you did think that, what pulled you through, Maria?
Yeah, there were times when we wanted to be collided into councils or into other organizations, organizations would come to us, just be part of us, we'll make it grow. But I never, I never believed in that. I always thought NLCUP needs to be an independent organization. And I fought and fought and fought for it. And I think that's why I remained the chair for so many years, because I would not let it go. I knew there was something that we could do, and eventually we can make it flourish. And I'm so glad that the board that we had, that all my friends that grew up with this idea, that we all kind of stuck together on that idea, because we could have given this up a long time ago, because we didn't have the resources. I didn't have the time. Neither did all my other fellow, colleagues that were part of the board. So yeah, there were times when we almost, or maybe we didn't have meetings the way we're supposed to. We let it go for too long. I think 2020, when COVID happened, not that we had more time, but I think COVID brought a lot of things into perspective. We started thinking, what if we lose what we've done for so many years? It just like many of you thought, I want to be closer to my family. I want to be, I want to do this for my kids. I think that's what happened with us, that we said, we need to do something now before we lose what we've done for so many years. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, it wasn't easy, you know.
Well, I know we're all grateful that you didn't let it go and that you had that sort of perseverance, because now we can convene together and have an identity in the credit union movement. So thank you. Winona, any contributions there?
Yeah, I can really remember when Maria and I were very concerned about it, and I can remember hours that we spent talking to each other about how we can make this work and how it's going to work, and we're not going to give up on it.
Yes.
Because by that time I was already on the board, I believe, right, Maria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are grateful for your perseverance as well, Winona, especially as an ally. You just really help support Maria in those efforts. So we appreciate it. How has, sorry, of all the milestones NLCUP has achieved, which has been so many, especially I think in the past few years, which one feels the most personal to you and why, Maria? And then we'll take it over to Winona.
I think being recognized as NLCUP, I think our name means a lot. I think just the name, if I walk into a room and I say, I'm with NLCUP, to me that says a lot. It's almost like you walk into a room with your daughter, and or your daughter goes to school and you're no longer Maria, you're Adriana's mom. That's the way I feel with NLCUP. I'm NLCUP's chair, because it's true. I mean, when you have kids, they forget about you being Maria. You become, somebody's mom or somebody's aunt or uncle or somebody's grandmother. That's the way I feel with NLCUP. I think NLCUP, the name, just says so much for us. Yeah.
What about you, Winona?
Well, I think for me, I think because it was so recent and it was so exciting for me, was when we did the I-10 lending school. That was just so amazing. And I was so happy that we finally did it. And it was just great.
That's a milestone. I am so glad that I was there present for that moment in history. I know that that's a project that for the audience, when I got hired early on, they were like, you have to make this happen. And I know that that was a dream that, the founders had for so long. And to bring that many people together, we had over 45 people participate, was just truly a testament to all the hard work of the founders, pushing this through and ensuring that Latinos had a voice, even if they were a small group of Latinos, they were pushing the agenda that we were going to have a place one day in the industry. So yeah, that's a good memory.
And Barbara, whenever you want to do something and you really believe in it, don't let it go. You gotta keep it. You gotta keep strong at it. If you believe that you can do a job within your credit union, don't let it go. stick to it. I wrote down once that I wanted to be a CEO, and I wrote it down, and I was an accounting manager for a credit union. And I remember I put it on one of my drawers on my desk. And once in a while, I would pull it out and I would look, okay, what are some of the things that I wanted to do? And that was one of the things, but there were other things that I wanted to do. I probably didn't accomplish all of them, but that was one that I really concentrated on. And I think if you concentrate on the things that you want to do, you can make things happen. And this was a dream come true from.
Mm.
And now, whenever we started talking about how do we do this as a national association? Because we could have gone as a council with maybe America's Credit Union or with Inclusive or even with AACUC. AACUC, they talked to us. They were very interested in maybe bringing us on as a chapter or as a council within their organization. But really, I wanted us to be independent. And I'm so glad that the board that we had and that we have right now, that they went along with that idea because we needed to be independent. And look at us now. And I can tell you that in 20 years from now, I hope I get to be around and to see the progress of what NLCUP has become. It's just amazing what we can do, but we need more people like y'all in this call,
Yeah.
back us up to talk about NLCUP, in the meetings that you have, make sure that people know. I sit on the Valera board, and Valera it's a big organization. I mean, 5,000 employees, they're huge, and for me, it's an honor to be on that board, to walk in there and talk about NLCUP and talk about the issues that affect people that look like me. It's very important, but you got to stand your ground. You don't have to be political either, and you don't have to fight either. Sometimes you don't even have to advocate. You just have to be present and
Mhm.
and let them know that you are there, not just representing credit unions, but representing people that look like you.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's a great pivot for the next question that I have, Maria. As we know, and this was it's such an like a my eyes were just big, even bigger than what they are. When I Google like, oh, Latina CEO women in the credit union industry, and Maria's name came up, and I'm like, history is so small. Like Maria serves on the board of NLCUP. Like I know Maria. That's crazy. That there's the movement is shifting very gradually to have more people of color as leaders. But the question that I have for you, Maria, is how has NLCUP shifted the conversation around Latinos in the credit union movement? So from where you started, to be in the spaces to now, how do you think NLCUP has impacted those
Well, first of all,
conversations?
Barbara, I did pay ChatGPT to, I trained it through AI.
I love that.
Next time somebody asks about Latinas, make sure you you gotta train that artificial intelligence tools. But I think the thing is that with NALCUP, we gotta make sure that NALCUP is not just an organization. And that's just it. I mean, you're not gonna do something just because, oh, I wanna serve on a board and I wanna be the one to speak, at the conferences and stuff like that. No. You gotta do it because you gotta make things happen. And how do you shape things? It's by believing in the project that you put together. So for instance, with NALCUP, we knew that we could bring up issues such as item lending. Tell me of another organization that is doing that. They started doing it because we brought it up. So item lending was never being discussed. All of a sudden, you hear organizations that are talking about item lending, serving underserved Hispanics. We started doing some of that, and maybe we're not big uh, political advocates, but I think our voice is being heard. And then the things that we put together as an organization. Now you, Barbara, putting programs together, the Cafecito con Cultura, and using the Spanglish. Look at all these TikTokers. that use Spanglish. And look at how famous they've become, you know, because they're not afraid to let the world know that they can, they can mix it and still be understood.
Mhm.
And that's just us. I don't think we've ever been afraid to bring up issues. I think we just have to do it in a very professional manner and like taking a stance, but not making it look like you took a stance. Yeah.
I like that advice. Winona, any to add there?
I would just say that I think it did really help legitimize it, because I know when I used to bring it up on a national board that I was on, I usually got kind of shushed up in a way. You know what I mean? Nobody really wanted to hear me when I would talk about it. So I think that NLCUP has really given a lot of weight and validity to that.
Yes, I love that. Maria, your legacy is tremendous already. But a question to you, what legacy do you hope NLCUP will leave for future generations of credit union professionals?
I think it's a pathway. I think NALCOP opens opportunities, whether it will be because you give somebody an opportunity to serve on a committee and they come in and they do a good job and now it looks good on your resume. You're already building a pathway for that person, whether it will be taking, place taking action on a webinar or serving on a committee or serving on different things. I think NALCOP has generated things that people can engage in. Before NALCUP, many voices were not being heard. And now you hear, of people, within our industry that are saying, oh, I know so and so because I saw him or I saw her at this conference and he was up in stage or, she was on one of the webinars. I think that's how we open a lot of, so building those pathways for others that look like us. I think that's what NALCUP is going to be. If we can build on that legacy, then it's going to look good on your resume. You're going to be able to walk in there and saying, I'm a member of NALCUP, or I serve on this webinar, I serve on this committee. This is some of the things. So we open opportunities. That's the legacy that we need to leave.
Yes, I love that. Winona, what legacy?
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, you're also part of that legacy. Maria is a huge part of it, but I think you are too, Barbara, because look at all the places that you are recognized now as a result of your work with NLCUP, and people can see how you were able to move up.
And now you need to do it for others.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's you can pay it forward. It's always, because, and, God does wonderful things. And I don't know if y'all are believers or not, but if you're not, it's okay too. God, if you do something good for somebody, you're going to turn around and something better is going to happen to you. And I've always been of that mindset. And I think it has helped me within my career and within my personal life. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. I actually met Maria in 2018 as a crasher. 2019, I keep forgetting the year. 2019 as a crasher. So it's just full circle again how now she is my boss.
It was this little girl. She was standing in line to get food, and she was behind me. And I said, "Oh, she looks like me with big eyes." And then we just hit it off from there. So
Yes. And I do remember at that time not seeing a lot of people that look like me at GAC even in 2019. And so when I saw Maria, I was like, yes, finally, like I can breathe a little bit. So it's amazing.
And I remember how excited I was when Barbara came to our credit union in her previous job, because she actually fit in with all the employees so perfectly.
I know. It's crazy how I met each of you in different stages of my life. How can emerging Latino leaders use NALCUP to position themselves to be at the decision-making tables in the future? Maria, I'll let you take a stab at that one, and then we'll pass it to my Winona.
I kind of mentioned that.
Yeah.
Put yourself in give yourself as a volunteer, you know, make sure that you raise your hand. I've always tell people, don't wait for somebody to come and take you by the hand, but raise your hand instead. You know, push yourself forward because nobody else is gonna come and do it. You know, if you think you can go to your boss and say, you know, I want your job. If you don't do anything about it, it's not gonna happen. You know, you gotta raise your hand. You gotta motivate yourself to get up from your desk and do something. So I think NLCUP can help you a lot, you know, by you being engaged and serving on committees. And I'm using NLCUP as a baseline. But think about all the other organizations that are available out there. You know, there's America's Credit Unions, there's committees, you know, there's all the leagues. The leagues have committees for everything, foundations. Give yourself as a volunteer because anything you list on your resume is gonna look good on you.
Winona, any advice?
I would just totally agree with that. And I think it's important, like at the same thing here, we have chapters still of credit unions. I don't know, in a lot of states, I don't know that they still do, but encouraging people to step up and volunteer and be part of those organizations is just, and be volunteers. It's just an amazing way to get a path forward. And I was like Maria, because I wanted to be president and CEO of a credit union. And at the time, I know this may sound crazy, but it was just about as hard for a woman to accomplish that unless you were talking about a $2 million credit union as it was for anyone else today. So you had to really focus on it.
Yeah.
And you know what, Barbara, one of the things too is whatever you do in life or with your career, do it so that you're shooting for an award. You know, you want somebody to, you know, build your resume so that your resume looks like this is a person that deserves to get an award. You know, because if you do that, that means you're serving others in your community, in the industry, and people are going to recognize you for that. And I think that's why both Winona and I have been graciously been recognized within the industry with one of the highest awards that you can get. You know, it's the Oscars of credit unions, and we were both recognized with that. I remember when I was inducted into the museum, the credit union museum. You know, I was like in disbelief, and my the first words, because they let you speak, and the first words were, "I'm in a museum." How many people can say that they're in a museum? But do things so that you're building yourself. Even if you don't get the award, do it so that you're building yourself for that award. And whatever it is that you look at somebody that got an award. And I tell you this because I used to sit through the Herb Wagner dinners, and I don't know if many of you have gone through that, but the Herb Wagner dinners, they do videos of the recipients and the work that they've done in their communities. And I would sit there throughout the years before 2017, because that's when I got mine. And I would always ask myself, I wonder if I would ever get that award. But I wanted to. I really wanted to. Deep inside me, I said, what do I need to do so that I can be up there and get that award? And you need to do that. You know, if whatever you're doing, look around you and say, you know, if you go to a place and they recognize somebody, why is it that that person is being recognized? They must have something, but you probably have something better. And build it up. It's so important.
Yeah. I totally agree, Maria. And the other thing that I would say is when I was on the foundation board, I fought hard to stop having only, I'm sorry, but old white men be the recipients. I hate to stereotype that way, but that was what it was.
Yeah.
And so I know the gentleman from Louisiana was one of the first ones that wasn't an old white man. Yes, he was a man, but he wasn't white. And he had fought long and hard for equality in credit unions there because they weren't even allowed to have a meeting because Black people weren't allowed to congregate. That's how sad it was. Yeah. But at any rate, I just think that is so important that we keep that going.
If
Yeah.
y'all ever get a chance, go through YouTube and look at those Herb Wagner award recipients and their stories. Oh my God, they're beautiful.
Mm.
They the stories, the things that they've done in their communities. Some are better than others, but the majority of yeah, the majority of them, they're really good. You know, to the point where you even cry because, how can they be doing so much when we're just sitting back here doing nothing?
Mm. Well, you're not doing nothing because you
Well,
formed
I know.
a lot of organizations. I don't even say you're not doing anything because I know you're busy. Maria doesn't sleep. So,
I don't.
moving on to the next questions, what do you think today's NALCUP members can do differently than your generation did to accelerate change? What can we do differently? Give us some advice. We want it all.
Well, y'all have all the tools. We didn't have any of the tools. I mean, you have ChatGPT. You have what's the other one? Gemini, Perplexity, and I mean, there's so many of them now. You have all those tools that we didn't have. And anything that you need to research, you have it on your hands. So you don't have an excuse not to write a better letter, not to fight a better case. Leave that up to our generation. We were going through that. Now, to me, it's like, this is a piece of cake. If I have to write a letter, you know, let ChatGPT do it for me. We didn't have that, guys. Everything was from the knowledge that we had and putting things together and learning from others. I was going through my files and I found I found this folder that I used to keep from people that would write to me, and I would like that letter. That was my chat GPT. I would keep that letter. And then later on, when I was writing a letter, I would go back to those letters to see if I could copy anything from them on the script. So we used to have a chat GPT in a different way. You would copy and paste from other people, but you have everything on your hands. I think if you want to move up, if you want to get a better salary, you need to position yourself to be better than your neighbor. If and always be out there. If nobody else wants to do a job at your credit union, maybe you can do it. Maybe don't, if you're the administrative assistant, but you know that the lending department could use your help, make some time, for that and go learn, make friends in that department so that you can learn that. I think it's good. And I think as NLCUP, using the tools that NLCUP, that Barbara and her team had put together, I think those really help because a lot of things are not like today. Today you're just hearing from me and Winona about, how this happened. But a lot of the things that Barbara and her team are doing in the conferences and the workshops is to better educate you.
Winona?
I would just say, I don't think it's that different in a sense of continuing to learn and grow, and also to kind of push back and try not to let our country go backwards.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So these are the last three final thoughts questions. If you could give advice to your younger self at the start of your credit union journey, what would you tell them, Maria?
Eat less.
What?
Use better creams. Just things like that. No, I think I would say get more education, educate yourself further. One of the things that I never did is I never got my master's degree. And now that I'm getting close to retirement, I was thinking, oh, maybe I can teach, but at the college level. But you know that most colleges, they require that you at least have a master's or a PhD. And I know with me being in a small community, I know they'll let me teach because of my experience. But not having that really bothers me. Yeah. So I think that's one thing. Educate yourself, learn everything you can, and never stop learning. Even at my age, I try to make things. If I hear something new that's coming up, whether it will be social media, or a new social platform, I try to engage, just so that I can be knowledgeable about it. And don't let your mind grow old. You can grow old, but your mind can still keep going.
Winona?
I really just agree with what Maria was saying. I can't really think of anything much to add to it because I also don't have more than a bachelor's degree. And it took me a long time to get that bachelor's degree because I did it while I was a working mom. And so it's just been a great journey, even though I did it a little bit the hard way. It's been a great journey. And I think that it's just important. And I was always taught to just work hard and, don't shy away from new opportunities.
Well, I love that. And that advice has been given to me since the start of NLCUP. And I think that's why I'm getting my master's degree, because I never thought about it until I joined NLCUP and the board's like, when are you getting your master's degree? So thank you for that advice. The other piece, the next question is, if you could whisper one piece of advice into the ear of every NLCUP member before they walk into a boardroom or big meeting, what would it be? Maria?
Stand tall.
Hmm.
Don't look away. Stand tall. You may not know everything that they're going to be discussing that day, but act like you know it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you learn from others. That's the thing that every time I walked into a boardroom, I didn't know everything. But, if they send you a package, read your package. Make sure that you're always more prepared than the rest of the people that are going to be there. And just because you may be the minority. So always prepare yourself. That's been my thing that, I try to read all my packages. And then the other thing is, if you're going to commit to serve on a board, do it in full force. If you cannot give 100%, then step down. Let somebody else do the job because that organization needs you 100%. That's why they ask you to serve. Yeah.
Winona?
A long whisper, no.
Whisper. That was a long. That's a good whisper, though. We need to hear that. Standing tall. Winona?
I really like what Maria had to say again. I think it's important that everyone be confident and share their opinions. And I mean, listen to others, of course, but also stand strong, because I know I noticed some of that with some board members, because we've always had representatives from the Latino community on our board. And I'm talking about, they're all Hispanic, but I'm talking about recent immigrant community. And now there's two of them. And I just pray that with the two of them together, that they will remain very strong and not be intimidated by someone else on the board that likes to intimidate people at times.
Love that. And so for the last question, what call to action do you have for our NLCUP members? Maria?
Invite others to join. We need to grow this organization, and the only way we're going to grow it is if y'all engage and if y'all talk about us. So every opportunity you get when you go to meetings, tell people, do you belong to NLCUP? And that's one thing that with me, I get invited to a lot of events. I was in Vegas in August, and I was part of a panel in a session, in a breakout session. But since I was already there, they invited me to be part of the main panel at the end of the conference on main stage. And guess who I mentioned? I mentioned NLCUP, I mentioned CULA. Those are two organizations that I really take deep into my heart. It's very important. I'm going to be in Vegas again this month for Money 2020. And I can assure you that NLCUP and CULA, they're going to hear our names. So tell others about us, because the things that we're doing, they benefit so many people.
Yes, Winona?
Well, that is extremely important. And the other thing is just to continue to learn and grow, and you'll succeed. And just be your best.
I love that advice. Well, that concludes all the questions that we have had prepared for our founder members today. To the audience, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros on this Friday afternoon. We'll see you guys back again on next Friday for the almost over webinar series for Hispanic Heritage Month. Again, thank you so much for attending today. This was recorded, so now we'll be living on the website. So now we have the full history of where
Oh, no.
Oh.
Again, thank you all so much for showing up today. We are so excited for this, and we'll see you Friday.
I might want you to edit that last part that I said out.
No.
No
Have a great
editing
day,
allowed.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.